Recently, just prior to the release of My Hero Academia's 7th season, I rewatched the first 6. I did this in an unhealthy manner, binge watching, and I mean obsessively, finishing all 6 in what was a couple of weeks. I was letting the inspirational message of the show take over my mind, leaving my body to rot as my heart craved to, like Izuku Midoriya, be a hero. Fortunately, the inspiration stuck with me. I've been going to the gym in a way that I never have before. Not as a chore that I should do, a path that inevitably leads to disappointment in my minimal results and my efforts fading away, but in what's nearing a passion. It has also led me to stand strong in or make leaps of faith, trusting myself to land on my 2 feet in the pursuit of my dreams. This and other projects that will likely drop in the relatively near future are part of the fruition of that. So, what is this video? My mind made a connection shortly after my binge between 2 of my favorite heroes, Captain America and, as mentioned above, Izuku Midoriya. Both dreamt of fighting against evil and, despite their inferior abilities due to physical disorders or the lack of a quirk, were willing to put themselves on the front lines against evils. Both were then given powers which they used to defend and protect others. This is a video essay exploring these 2 unlikely heroes. These heroes who arose from passion, dedication, and perseverance. Exploring what their stories are, why they're heroic, why that's meaningful to us, and how to become heroic, no matter the odds, just like them. Chapter 1. Hero. When you think hero, you will likely first think of a superhero or another fictional character. Heroes are often designated to the imaginary. A Superman, or maybe a knight in shining armor who defeats mythical dragons. The 2 heroes I chose to highlight in this video are superhuman. More than human. I don't have any problem with those examples being what stands out in our mind, so long as we also recognize what stories are for. To simplify and explore the human. To put us in another's shoes, so that we can be taught, warned, and inspired. So, taking the fantastic out of a hero. What actually is a hero? As Oxford Language puts it, a hero is, quote, a person who is admired or idealized for courage, outstanding achievements, or noble qualities, end quote. This would include a firefighter rushing into the blazing heat to save another's life, or the grandfather whose love and care for his grandchild nobly supersedes any regard for himself. It's touching, but it's not quite what you want to hear, is it? It wasn't for me, at least. There's something about that definition that leaves me wanting more. Is that all it is to be a hero? To be in the right job? To have grandkids that you deeply love? I, for one, don't think so. Not that there aren't heroes in those roles, but that there's more to it. This definition isn't wrong to posit that a hero should be noble and courageous, and I agree that achievements can be heroic. But that's not all being a hero is. Quote, the hero is the character who faces their challenges and transforms, end quote. Donald Miller in Hero on a Mission. This definition clicks more than the dictionary definition. The emphasis on facing challenges and growing gives the definition more spirit than the rigid dictionary definition. That definition also reminds me of stories. Harry Potter must learn and develop until he faces Voldemort, whose power and influence single-handedly threatened to uproot the entire magic society. Spider-Man faces challenges, keeping up his life as a high school student while also protecting the streets of New York. I do also find this definition lacking in some ways. First, people can face challenges and transform for the worse, becoming cynical, resentful, or malicious. Second, I believe there to be some level of altruism innate in heroism. I believe that a motivation to use your power, your strength, and your voice for the good of others is part of being heroic. Besides some level of altruism, what else are the above definitions missing? It could be included in faces their challenges and transforms, but I want to highlight it. Heroes sometimes fail, but if and when they do, they get back up and face the challenge or villain again. So, what exactly does it mean to be a hero? Courage, noble qualities, facing challenges, some level of altruistic motivation, and perseverance. All that is part of it, and I think it was important to lay out before looking at the specific stories. But there's a part of heroism that only the stories can flesh out. So, before spelling out a more precise definition, let's turn to the heroes themselves with Chapter 2, their stories. What are the stories of these two heroes? Spoiler warning for what is now a 12-year-old movie. Gosh, I'm old. Captain America, the First Avenger. Steve Rogers, Captain America. Steve Rogers was born physically weak, with cardiovascular issues, asthma, high blood pressure, and heart trouble, just to name a few of his problems. Despite these, he tried again and again to join the army, even at the risk of falsification charges. Failing each time, he turned around and tried again. He then is approached, shown that it is known who he is and what his crime is. But after asking why he tries so hard, is told there's an opportunity, one available even to him. Now an army recruit, Steve struggles through some basic training, but when a fake grenade is thrown, he dives on top to prevent others from being harmed, showing a sense of heroism that stronger, more physically qualified people didn't. He is then drugged up, or however the machine works, to become the first, and as it turns out, only American super soldier. The machine, and all information about the machine, being destroyed by a Hydra agent. Steve Rogers is then denied the opportunity to go to the front lines. The higher-ups determined not to lose their only super soldier. Not lose their only way to relearn how to create more. Instead, now fully known as Captain America, he spends time working with a politician's effort to raise support for the war as a performer. In this capacity, he travels to Europe to raise morale and meets some of the soldiers on the front lines who are discouraged from a recent loss that left soldiers, including Steve's friend Bucky, in captivity or potentially killed. Captain America, as well as Peggy Carter, disobey commands in an attempt to save them. Captain America saves the soldiers, and having shown his immense potential as a soldier, begins a quest to knock out Hydra bases. After defeating each of the Hydra bases, he faces Red Skull, who is intent on dropping autopiloted bombs on major American cities. And Captain America defeats him. Well, sort of. The Red Skull is more taken out by the Tesseract. It's weird. Captain America then, to prevent casualties from the automated bombs on board, crashes the plane. He is frozen in ice and found decades later. In later movies, he joins the Avengers and continues his heroic work. That is the origin of Captain America, the first Avenger, and my first hero. In high school, I could wear a unique Captain America shirt for more than a week straight. Enough time that by doing my laundry regularly, I could have only worn Captain America shirts for the entirety of high school. I don't think before writing this I knew why I liked Captain America as much as I did, but I was somewhat obsessed. In a lot of ways, Captain America was to me as All Might was to Izuku, to whose story we will now turn. Izuku Midoriya, hero name Deku. In a world where 80% of people are born with some quirk or superpower, Izuku was born quirkless. Izuku was devastated because he, for as long as he could remember, wanted to become just like the number one hero, All Might. He went through his early years taking notes frantically about every hero he saw, their strengths, how they used their powers, in the hopes that he could use that information to himself become a hero. One day, a slimy, in both senses of the term, villain arose and kidnapped Izuku to use as a human shield against the heroes. All Might, happening to be in town, rushed in and saved Izuku. Izuku fanboyed hard. All Might had to leave, but Izuku had one question that he needed answered. The question that he needed answered most. If he, Izuku, being quirkless, could become a hero. All Might breaks him the bad news. No, Izuku could not become a hero. The slimy villain, who Izuku had accidentally knocked out of All Might's pocket custody, rises again and kidnaps another child, Bakugo, a strong but rude and kind of totally a bully to Izuku. All the heroes who were nearby were hesitant to fight the villain, worried about harming Bakugo, and feeling that their powers weren't what would be effective. Izuku arrives on the scene, and despite being powerless, rushes in to save Bakugo. All Might sees the heroic nature of Izuku, and decides to make Izuku's wish come true. Izuku then faces a lot of challenges to grow into this new power, and after many months of extreme physical training, to prepare Izuku to receive All for One, All Might's quirk, and one of the only quirks that can be passed between multiple owners. With this power, Izuku is able to make it into UA, a top-notch high school renowned for its hero program. Izuku then faces a lot of challenges to grow into this new power, including the physical harm that it ends up giving his unprepared body, and the immense stress that villainous acts cause to heroes. From there, Izuku's journey continues to be one of dedication and growth into the responsibility that comes with being a hero. Now, with their stories laid out, we can move on to Chapter 3, Comparison and Analysis. Having laid out the basics of the two stories, it's time to look at what both characters share, where they differ, what it means for heroism, and what makes it meaningful to us. Both of these stories follow an unlikely hero, a storytelling superstructure that brings a nobody, an average Joe, to the position of hero. They certainly aren't the only such examples of this superstructure. Other examples include David fighting Goliath, Poe from Kung Fu Panda, or Bilbo Baggins, just to name a few that stand out. But what makes the unlikely hero stories meaningful? Something that stands out in both Izuku and Steve's stories is their dedication and perseverance, or as said above, the heroic manner in which they face their challenges. Despite the nearly impossible odds, neither gave up trying. Then, because of their perseverance, they were given, from an external source, an opportunity to rise above what anyone had thought possible of them. Both gave their all to do what was heroic, even before they had any real opportunity presented to them. And when the opportunity arose, they took it. Just try to imagine for a second Steve Rogers' story. But when he is denied entry for the first time, he gives up, moves on, tries to find another dream. Now, it's definitely possible that he could have had a meaningful and perhaps even very impactful life. But there's something heroic about that dedication, that perseverance, that really makes his story impactful. Another similarity is that both before and after they received their powers, Izuku and Steve were willing to choose the heroic action, even at possible cost to themselves. Early on in Captain America, Steve says, quote, "I don't want to kill Nazis. I want to protect," end quote. Another example of him choosing the heroic is when he disobeys orders and chooses to invade a Hydra base to save captured soldiers. Izuku had a similar desire to help others, no matter the physical cost, stepping in to save children, fellow students, and citizens, all despite the serious physical harm mentioned earlier, and, at times, violation of the school's rules. Both of the heroes were willing to deal with just about any potential consequences to themselves in order to take the heroic path, to save another. Their hearts were good down to the core. Both also are fighting evil. This may seem like an obvious point, but it is also important to point out when thinking about what is heroic. Both this and the last point tie into my earlier point about the altruistic nature of heroes. Good and evil are different traits than altruistic and self-centered are. But to be truly evil, one must be self-centered enough to disregard another, and to be truly good, heroic, one must be willing to see and serve others. Where the characters differ is more challenging to point out. One of the biggest differences lies in storytelling. As I was thinking about this project, I realized I was able to understand Izuku more than Steve, even though he speaks Japanese. # subs not dubs. Revisiting my first hero, I found that the story wasn't nearly as moving to me as it was when I was young. The story of My Hero Academia, on the other hand, was far more compelling. There are two major reasons for this. 1. It has the time to show Izuku pressing forward through immense sacrifice, struggle, self-doubt, and growing because of all of it. In Steve Rogers' story, he got implanted with a drug of some kind, and in that one moment there was some physical pain, and he pushed through it. But after that, it was almost entirely just kicking butt. There were some more scenes that showed sacrifice, Bucky falling to his presumed death, and Steve's self-sacrifice at the end, but it was just a few moments. This is one of the major reasons I liked My Hero Academia as much as I did, and why Izuku was so heroic. Perseverance despite immense struggles. This is one of the major reasons that I liked My Hero Academia as much as I did, and what makes Izuku so heroic. Perseverance despite immense struggles. 2. My Hero Academia had the opportunity to bring up nuances in its society. It shows some corruption among the good, makes its villains more nuanced while still remaining evil, and it has a greater ability to flesh out the stories of its smaller characters. Both of these points are largely because My Hero Academia is a show and not a movie, and therefore is not constrained to just a couple hours, and the story has more time to develop such nuances. Now that we've looked at the stories, let's lay out our final definition. Hero, one who courageously faces challenges with the intent of helping or protecting others, whose noble qualities shine brightly and stand out in their story. To be a hero is not a moment, but a trait. And I feel like this is important to emphasize here. It's not a trait that one is born with. It is a learnable trait that will expose itself in the key moments. Another important point is that the challenges, unlike it is so often in fiction, aren't limited to physical threats, say from a villain or from a natural disaster. I doubt this definition is perfect, nor is it the only one. Even the two definitions I referenced before are good and important in their own right. My definition is as close as I could put in language to the heart of this video. I did find it interesting to consider whether there was any part of heroism related to the ability to inspire. Both of the heroes here have inspired me. My rewatching of My Hero Academia brought me to terms with how I was living and inspired me to make more of my life. But ultimately, I believe this to be a side effect, not a part of being a hero. There are heroes who are disrespected and mocked. On top of that, as shown in My Hero Academia, there are people who are inspired by evil, some worshipping those with a complete disregard for human life. But although I may be leaving it out of the definition, inspiration is the biggest reason why heroes are meaningful to us, why their stories are meaningful to us. Because we see them and hope that we can do something heroic too. This meaning brings us to a second but similar point. Why we need stories. Stories allow humans to gain perspective on life by further duration of the story, putting us in another's shoes. As George R.R. Martin wrote, "A reader lives 1,000 lives before he dies. The man who never reads lives only one." These perspectives can warn us of consequences to our actions and inspire us to make important decisions by showing us that we can do it, just like Izuku or Steve did. The unlikely hero story can remind us that you, yes, even you, can do great things. And that is a large part of why this video exists. I saw Izuku's perseverance and dedication, and I wanted to be able to do something like him. Which brings us to the final chapter. Chapter 4, You and Me. Most of the commentary so far has been on abstract stories, ones that were created in the human mind. This final chapter is for disabstractification. Taking the micro, the individual stories, and applying it to the macro. General thoughts that you and I can apply in our own daily lives. The principles of these stories still stand true. It doesn't take being born lucky to become a hero. What it takes is a mindset of determination and a deep internal motivation to do good. To some, this may actually be directly connected to their career or family. To others, it may be finding volunteer work. But there's a reason I said earlier that there's more to it. A lot of people believe themselves to be more heroic than they are because of their beliefs or their platitudes. Being a hero is hard. It takes effort every day to orient your mind correctly, to put focus on what is important, and to make a correct judgment, a challenge that is often much harder in real life than it is in fiction. Let me emphasize the definition I reached once again. One who courageously faces challenges with the intent of helping or protecting others, whose noble qualities shine brightly and stand out in their story. Give me a second to tell a little bit about myself to highlight what I mean. In the past, I have dreamt of, wished for, some type of apocalypse. It was stupid, really, but I wanted a physical challenge, and not physical in the same sense as exercise. Physical in the sense of real, out there, in the physical world, a challenge that I could see and touch. One that it would take physical effort to survive and overcome. Much like the Villain League, much like All for One, much like Hydra. I wanted to have to fight for my life, not just keep drifting through it. I wanted the simple choice of finding food and shelter to survive, rather than finding the purpose and meaning in my existence. Saying that reminds me of the fact that suicide is a far more common occurrence in places where life is abundant and easy than in places where every day is a struggle to survive, a struggle to hold on to the strands of life. It would be very convenient, in the most inconvenient way possible, to have such a clear physical threat. But I think what made these two stories mean so much to me was both Steve's and Izuku's strengths where I am lacking. They both had a perseverance and a grip on life that I don't yet know if I have. I, until very recently, wasn't putting in what it takes to be a hero. They were leagues beyond me. It's hard to beat fictional characters sometimes, but that's part of what makes them so important to me. Their stories are able to give me a ruler, a guidepost, something to hold my actions up to and evaluate myself. As I wrap up, I hope you'll take a moment to look at yourself, at these stories, and hopefully feel as inspired and motivated as I did. I hope it doesn't sound like I'm tooting my own horn when I say this, but this video is my first attempt at becoming a hero. I'm done living my life passively. And I hope that my voice can maybe make someone, maybe you, think, hey, I want to be a hero too.